Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the L. Ron Hubbard Theater in Hollywood, California. Tonight we present a live broadcast of the Golden Age Radio Hour featuring L. Ron Hubbard's adventure story, The Lieutenant Takes the Sky. It was dark in the prison, too dark to see the rats that fought for breadcrumbs before the door. Aiming by sound alone, Mike Malloy threw a savage shoe. There was a squeak of protest and the hurried patter of retreat.
Oh, why the hell did I do that? I can't eat the stuff.
The rats came forth anew, but with more caution. Soon reassured, they were battling over the crumbs again.
You know, you guys, you're lucky. If there was some way I could reincarnate in reverse to a rat and go out under that door... Rats, I'll give you some advice. Never sock a colonel. No matter how badly he needs it. And for that matter, rats, never sock a lieutenant colonel. And I might add that it's also unlucky to swab a deck with a general's aide. Gets his clothes dirty and he doesn't like it.
A sound came throbbing into the cell. A plane droned high in the Moroccan blue. It brought melancholy thoughts to Mike Malloy. It was the sound of freedom, sound of excitement, the clean sung on flashing wings.
If I had to do it all over, hell, there's no use lying about it. I'd sock the colonel. And the lieutenant colonel. And his aide, all just the same.
The rats grew quiet at the sound of his voice and then fell on the banquet once more.
Let that be a lesson to you. Don't lie. Always be honest and upright. Thank God for your blessings. Check your engine before you take off. You never argue with your superior, and be a good soldier in all things. And someday you'll be where I am. That, my furry friends, is the secret of success. Once I was a private.
Boot beats sounded in the corridor, and arms grounded with a rhythmic thud, and a key grated in the lock. A corporal, looking satanic, lifted his lantern to the height of his head and studied the cell, trying to locate Mike. Mike got up. He bowed courteously.
Gentlemen, you honor me. Come in, by all means, and have some crumbs with the rest of the rats.
Sacré nom d'un cochon!
I didn't call you pigs. I said rats. Come, my good fellow. The general has, of course, sent for me to extend his apologies.
Monsieur le Capitaine, you astound me. How is it that you knew?
You mean?
Why, yes, but the general is very urgently requesting your presence immediately. But I cannot understand how you...
There's a catch to this someplace. Last time I heard from the army, I was outward bound to a penal battalion. How come the sudden change of heart?
Monsieur le Capitaine, I am but a corporal of the armies of France. The policy of generals...
What? They don't consult you? But come, my favorite rodent, lead me forward. Though I'm not sure that it would be smarter to stay where I am.
He stepped into line, and the corporal barked commands, and they moved off.
Allez! Allez!
Captain Mike Malloy was conducted to the general's office with great speed. Before the door, the files grounded their rifles with a loud crash, and the corporal threw the portal wide. The people in the office turned. General Leroy gave a start and scowled. He had not expected his order to be so promptly carried out, and he had never imagined for an instant that Captain Mike Malloy of the French Air Service could be anything but neat. Just now, Mike was not neat at all, not polished a bit. A week in jail had taken away all gloss, and his condition yelled dungeons. But for all that, Mike was cool enough. He walked out of the guard file and into the office. He stopped before the general's desk, looking neither right nor left.
You sent for me, sir.
I did. You seem to be somewhat, untidy.
No illusion about it. Your observation is correct.
Leroy coughed and glared, and then gradually composed himself to necessity.
Captain Malloy, I wish to introduce you to Mademoiselle Lois de Gaulle.
Mike turned. Lois Dagan, a little bewildered, nodded to him and gave him a slight smile. Mike bowed, but he did not lower his glance. She was a very lovely woman, all neat and crisp in delicate white blouse. Her eyes were blue and frank. Mike was spellbound. The general coughed to distract Mike's attention.
I wish to present you to Monsieur Delage.
Mike turned to shake Delage's hand. The man was patently important. There was a certain arresting quality about him which one could trace to his eyes. They were odd, those eyes, because it was impossible to tell their exact color.
Captain Malloy is the man I've been telling you about. He has just returned from scout duty, and I apologize for his appearance. However, it has nothing to do with his competence. He knows every square inch of the Middle Atlas Mountains, having fought throughout the last campaign in that region, and he is one of our best pilots.
Mike looked on in amazement and heard in astonishment such praise.
Yes. In addition, we will send you with our Lieutenant Reynard, who is an excellent pilot. I doubt you will suffer any inconveniences on your trip.
General, I am very pleased at your generosity. I could have hoped for nothing more satisfactory.
Monsieur Delage, it is with great pleasure that I am able to extend to you the courtesies of the French army. It is little enough to do for such an important personage as yourself.
They bowed to each other.
And I too thank you, General.
Mademoiselle, while I regret your insistence upon accompanying the party into the Middle Atlas, which I assure you is no place for a lovely woman, I shall nevertheless do all in my power to aid you.
The personage bowed in the entrance to the general and then to Mike.
We shall see you in the morning, Capitan.
Mr. Gann smiled at the two officers and she withdrew. When the door had closed, Mike looked with suspicion at Leroy.
If you don't mind me saying so, sir, it's hardly the time for an exposition of the private sort.
Yeah, well, no one asked your opinion. Why did they have to bring you here in that condition? If you could see yourself.
Sir, I assure you that if I had had time, and if I had known, I would have presented another facet of my glittering self. But your guards are most abrupt, and your jail... General, you should look into that jail.
Yeah. Enough of your insolence, Malloy. You were brought here for one purpose and one purpose only. You can go to the battalion penal as scheduled, or you can fly this party into the Middle Atlas. I give you that choice.
By any chance, would the Middle Atlas trip be worse than the battalion penal?
Oh, probably. You know the conditions inland as well as I do. Berbers sniping at planes, strange troop movements, and the lead about to blow off all Morocco. I chose you because I would not issue an order to such a gentleman.
You're ordering Lieutenant Reynard.
Yeah, well, yes, Lieutenant Reynard. He has committed one too many murders in the name of espionage, and as such he cannot be censured for doing his duty. I can only send him on such a mission.
Sir, if it is going to be as bad as all that, well, how can you send such an important man as Monsieur Delage into the interior?
Yeah, I sent him nowhere. Monsieur Delage is much less important than he himself thinks. He is a small-time politician in France, has some remote connection with the French army, and through ignorance has selected this time to go searching for a book in the Middle Atlas.
A book?
Yes, I understand it is the girl's idea. She is an American, and like you, seems to be crazy. The book is Laoud, the only volume missing from the Carouine University Library. It has been gone for 800 years and was last in the possession of the Sultan Ibn Tumart. I believe it contained an alchemical formula for the manufacture of gold from base metals. Ooh, that is all pure bosh. But these three people are crazy to go on their trip, and they have asked the French army to help them. Very well. Help them we shall. But they will also help us.
I don't understand.
And you wouldn't. If I were to send a squadron of scouting planes into the Middle Atlas, all hell will break loose. You know it, and I know it. We cannot afford to start a Al-Fasai's uprising for him by making the first move.
Mike knew about that. The mysterious organizer, the very apparent disaffection of Morocco's populace, Al-Fasai, was as elusive as a gale of wind. He was felt, but never seen. It was thought that he was some fanatical Berber out preaching the jihad, but one could never be too sure. Here today and gone tomorrow, and never once had either army espionage or soldiery set eyes upon him.
Al-Fasai must be located. His movements in the Middle Atlas must be uncovered. Now, attend. The last of 5 agents sent into the Middle Atlas has failed to report after 2 weeks. Lieutenant Ferro has evidently been discovered by the Berbers. And you know the things the Berbers do. Very well. We cannot afford to waste more agents or more time ferreting out the intentions of Al-Fasai. We must find out if there is any troop concentration in the Atlas of any kind, and be prepared to meet it. You and Renard will have to the cover of this expedition. It is doubtful you will be suspected immediately. You are to get that information and bring it to us as fast as you can.
Sounds like sudden death to me.
Men do not leave the battalion penal after a year, and your sentence is 5.
Oh, I'm not kicking, but it seems a shame to use civilians as pawns.
You're thinking of the girl. Malloy, you are to give no consideration to the fate of these people. Compared to the safety of every white man in Morocco, their lives are nothing. This is the way wars are fought, and this is the way a soldier must carry on. Feelings have nothing to do with duty.
Yes, yeah, but just the same, that girl is much too...
Your attention will be for Al-Fasai. All of your attention, mind you. His movements must be spotted, and if possible, his identity uncovered.
And if we get killed?
Well, that would be most unsoldierly of you. And very ungrateful. However, know that if you are killed, your family would probably forget many things about you and remember you as a hero.
That is most solacing.
Well, report to the airbase in the morning. If you don't, I'll have you shot as a deserter. Good day, Captain.
Good day.
In the chilled desert morning, with the world still half asleep, Captain Mike Malloy examined the 2 observation ships which had been allotted to Monsieur Delange and party. They had been posted the night before, and so it was with some surprise that he could find nothing wrong with the planes. He had at least thought to discover a time bomb in a cockpit. Morocco of late had been like that. He was just completing his search when he heard a slight rustling sound on the other side of the fuselage. He knew better than to straighten up. Abruptly, he jackknifed. A knife shrieked through the fabric where he had stood an instant before. On his knees, Mike saw a pair of bare feet under the ship. He snatched at the ankles and yanked back. With a yelp of terror, the would-be assassin laid hold of the tailskid and refused to be pried away from it. He was evidently a Carawine student, out about from the cut of his jalaba and his fanatical intention, as well as the well-bred way he swore.
Let go!
A very smooth voice behind Malloy said,
Oh, we have trouble already.
Still holding the ankles, Mike turned to see Lieutenant Renard, that exquisitely handsome officer, had once been known as Monsieur Toutou of the Paris underworld, before France needed him in his espionage corps. With a hard toe of his boot, Renard kicked the assassin's fingers away from the tailskid. He bent over and clutched the dark throat, and his metallic eyes drilled holes through the man's skull.
Who sent you? Huh? Quick! Talk. Who sent you? Talk, and you can go. You refuse to tell, and you go meet Shaitan.
Barred swine, kill me or not, but you have but little time to live yourself.
Then you say no?
Wait, he's not even...
He tried to stab you in the back.
There was a muffled explosion. Mike had not even seen Renard draw. The smoke lifted greasily away from the side of the embryo Hadith's head. In disgust, Mike dropped the twitching ankles.
You didn't have to do that, Reynard.
They are better off dead. You are too soft. You have too much heart. You take the part of a flogged black man, battered down staff officers, and almost go to the penal battalion. And now, ma foi, you plead the life of a man who just tried to kill you.
Oh.
Dieu.
Mike hurriedly tried to shove the corpse out of the sight, but she had already seen it. Lois Degan's face was the color of paper.
Mademoiselle, we regret subjecting you to the sight of a corpse, but...
Mike kicked Renard in the ankle.
My apologies, Miss Dugan.
Fascinated with horror, she could not look away. Suddenly, Mike understood that this girl was lately out of glittering salons and was probably looking at her first dead man. He stepped around the wing and took her arm,
You go in this other plane.
trying to lead her away. She recovered herself and angrily jerked away from him.
Please, Captain, keep your hands to yourself.
She stared at those hands as though she could see blood on them. Mike shrugged.
Anyway, that's still your plane over there.
May I ask which one you intend to pilot?
That one over there, in which you are going to ride.
Thank you so much, but I prefer the other, if you don't mind.
She turned and started to walk, but she stopped. Renard had not seen her before. He had reason to believe that he was the devil with the ladies, did Renard, and he was greatly intrigued by Lois Degan's wavy hair and lovely face, and the way the morning breeze pressed the white sports suit against her. Uncertainly, she looked at Renard. His mouth curved down into a grin, and his eyes ate her up. Lois faced about and walked rapidly toward Mike's ship. Mike grinned after her.
Thanks, Reynard.
What?
Delage had arrived, burdened with boxes and grips.
Ah, good morning, Captain. I would say that your appearance has greatly improved. A clean uniform practically makes a gentleman out of you.
Practically. Where do you think you're going with those boxes?
Why, in the plane. I say, you have 2 observation planes here. Isn't there a cabin ship available? After all, the desert wind and sun.
We're just taking 2 ships that can fight.
Fight?
If you think that I'm gonna go into the Middle Atlas on an ice wagon, you're crazy. Al Fasai has several squadrons scattered throughout Morocco.
Al Fasai? I have heard of that name before. Isn't he in the pay of the totalitarian powers to restore Morocco
To give Morocco to the dictators. He's the shadow over the land, according to the Arabs, and nobody knows who he is or where he is. But we felt his weight, every now and then. For instance...
Mutely, he pointed to the body under the fuselage.
Oh, he's dead.
Of certainty, gentlemen. A bullet placed just so, and the trigger squeezed just so.
Capitan, do you expect trouble?
Trouble tags me around like a hound dog. We haven't had, too much time to stand here talking, so you can't take all that baggage. Just put it down and I'll have a mechanic take care of it for you. But we've got to get out of here before the air gets rough. You'll be sick, especially when we get over the Atlas Mountains. Jacques! Take this man's baggage to the hangar and store it. Monsieur Delage, will you please ride with Lieutenant Reynard? My ship over there has a sun hood, and Miss Dugan's complexion, I am sure, would suffer much more than yours.
Delage shrugged. The mechanic took the boxes away, and a squad bore off the body of the renegade. Mike climbed up into his ship and stood up, surveying the field and air before them as he buckled on his helmet. He settled down into the pit and buckled his belt, sliding the tinted glass hood over the cockpit with his right hand. He smiled at Miss Dugan.
It keeps you from getting burned. Buckle your belt, okay? Hey, would you get into your parachute, please?
Why?
Mike looked at her with wonder.
Haven't you heard that planes sometimes go to pieces in the air?
They don't just go to pieces.
When bullets hit them, they do.
Bullets?
Say, look here. Did you think this was going to be a Sunday school picnic?
Oh, why, no, but...
Al Fasai is likely to strike any day now. And if he does, and we happen to be in the Middle Atlas, we're in for some fun. If you'll pardon my saying so, this is a hell of a time to go off looking for a book on alchemy. If you weren't wise to the political situation, maybe you'd like to cancel the engagement? Well, you're too pretty to get full of lead.
You doubt my courage?
Not up to that question. But I sure have a low opinion of your common sense.
He cracked his palm against the throttle, and the swift craft streaked out across the golden sand to lighten and then spring into the air. Behind them came Renard. Far ahead, like pink clouds along the horizon, loomed the Atlas. Lois Dagan watched the captain's back, and two facts were at war within her. Captain Mike Malloy, crisp in a fresh uniform, was a very handsome fellow. And he was undoubtedly a calloused scoundrel who could kill a man without a second thought. All the evidence she had was slim, but at the same time, she had seen it with her own eyes. The problem of his presence baffled her. She had hardly expected an American in the uniform of a French flight captain. Quite definitely she knew she could not trust him. And while she mused, she was conscious of a small sound which recurred 3 times to be followed by a fluttering, rapid staccato. She looked around and saw that a strip of fabric had become unloosened on the right wing and was now cracking in the breeze. And more, she saw the instant she looked, a hole appeared farther out. She looked down and beheld men, doll-like from this height, jumping up and down and shaking their fists and rifles at the plane whose shadow sailed unconcernedly over them.
They're shooting at us.
You didn't think they'd throw us kisses, did you? Or did you?
You're not nice.
Yeah, well, neither are they. If we weren't going places, I'd go back and let some of the high blood pressure out of them.
But why should they shoot at us?
Lady, you are riding in a plane with the French tricolor on it.
I know that, but why?
Are you dumb? Or do you don't know anything at all about Morocco?
Why, yes. I mean, no. I always had a picture of this land as one of date palms and camels and Arabs and sunlight.
Well, forget it. This is the land of body lice and... what's the use? You'll know soon enough. The French are supporting Sidi Mohammed, the Sultan in power, and they don't worry about little things like anti-government propaganda. They're too lenient on the boys, and an Arab or a Rif or a Berber, they can't understand that. So the populace is listening to the sweet song of Al-Fasai. Boy, if this government ever is overturned, the brown lads will find out how easy they had it before. And the point of all this, we're bound for the Middle Atlas where the Berbers have never been really whipped. And so, well, Al-Fasai's song of freedom isn't fertile anymore. From the place we're going come the assault troops of the uprising when, and if it occurs...
But why don't they arrest this Al-Fasai?
Why? Look, instead of scratching, why doesn't a dog just find the flea and kill it?
Maybe he can't.
Right. Look, I feel kind of responsible for you. Are you sure you couldn't let this business wait a few months? Say the word and I'll turn back.
Captain Malloy, my uncle dreamed for 30 years of finding Laoud. He never could because of bad health and lack of money. He's dead now, but I'd like to fulfill his dream for him. There's something else. He expended so much money in search of that. Well, there's none left. A year and a half ago, I communicated with the French Society of Archaeology, stating that I had some evidence supporting the probable location of Laoud, which vanished about 800 years ago. They wrote that Monsieur Delage had expressed an interest, but it was not until last month that Monsieur Delage cabled me that he was willing to help me and would accompany me and finance a search, and I took what funds I had,
And you can't turn back now, even if you wanted to.
Yes, I guess that's it.
But, hell, a lovely woman like you doesn't belong out here in the Morocco. You belong in a salon with...
That's where I was. A salon in New York, modeling clothes for the rich. If you've ever stood on your feet 8 hours a day, holding your arms to have women paw at you...
Oh, they never do.
He banked sharply, and she looked down to see a rifleman dismounted and pointing his gun skyward. Even as she looked, a puff of white smoke rolled from the muzzle. She could not tell whether the bullet hit the plane or not.
Don't worry. They're damn good shots, but when rifles bring down fast planes, we'll stop flying. So you were a model after your uncle sunk the wherewithal into a crazy stunt to recover an alchemical formula. Say, just who is this Delage?
He's very important.
Obviously.
Politically.
Well, he ought to know better than to drag you across Le Maroc at such a time. Of course, it did me a favor.
How so? I gained the impression that you disliked this duty.
Well, if I hadn't taken it, I would be marching off to the penal battalion. And I am so duly grateful.
But what did you do?
Oh, nothing much. I beat up a colonel, and a lieutenant colonel, and his aide. I fear that the aide was a mistake. He had a glass jaw.
Must you fight? I'm sorry.
No need to be sorry, miss. You behold Michael St. Marie Jacques Malloy du François in the flesh. Lately returned from Spain, more lately from Cochin, China, and at present flying a lovely young lady over Le Maroc.
Du François? Why, I remember my uncle talking for days about a Du François that had spoken to him in Paris. How is it that
Mamselle, you behold the dark-hued lamb of the tribe. If I even start for Paris, there's a riot.
But why?
Why not? My father was the same way. He deserted with the colonel's wife and fled to New York. And the family forgave the son, and then the son... but why go on?
You mean you're in disgrace?
Dear lady, what a weak word. There is a standing order on the army list that I have to be thrown to the wolves the instant there's the slightest excuse. Witness my arrest. Now, all I did...
I know, but surely there must have been some reason in the first place?
Yes, you see, I lost 100,000 francs at Monte Carlo and carelessly signed my grandfather's name. I explained to them that, it was to save the family honor. It was no use. They said it was forgery. But then I killed a lieutenant in Saigon.
Forgery? Murder?
It wasn't murder. It was a duel. However, his father was the Minister of War. And then there's that case of the girl at the Follies.
Oh, please don't go on.
But I only tried to protect my cousin. I was already in a bad, so I thought I would just be a shame if
Please?
Well, then I was squatching treasurer, and the funds vanished, and they said embezzlement.
Of course, these things just happened.
That's right. Everywhere I go, there's trouble. So the family threw me over at last.
I should think they would.
And if I get out of this alive, oh
You
boy.
really believe that this is dangerous?
Lady, this is no picnic.
He pointed up through the hood.
You see?
Less than 5,000 feet above them hovered a plane. It was neither diving nor was it running away. It was matching their speed mile for mile. Finally, she turned and looked back to see that Renard was at their own height about 1,000 yards behind them. Again, she looked up at the strange plane.
But who could that be? I can make out no insignia.
The eyes of Allah Fasai. You buckle your chute over your shoulders now.
With a sinking sensation, she stared earthward. They had begun to cross the first barren reaches of the craggy Atlas. All below was tumbled, dun rocks and miserable scrubs of trees. Not for miles were their landing place.
Once, those gentlemen rode battle horses and flourished lances and sang poetry. Well, now they squat behind machine guns and carry grenades and fly. And they swear in gutter French. Civilization, dear lady, is a great boon to the world.
He had clicked on his radio phone, and his fingers rolled the dials. He pressed his helmet phones closer to his head, listening, and then he shrugged.
It's all in code. I can guess what he's saying, but... Oh, sorry. Hold on tight, we're going up.
You mean...
It was impossible for the girl to keep the other ship in sight. And then, above the engine's roar, she heard a chattering burst of sound. A round hole appeared in the glass hood, and slivers of glass rained upon her. And then she saw the other ship. It had been diving to meet them, and now, at terrific speed, it was flashing level and firing as it came. The air about the French ship was lined like a spider web with straight lines of tracer. Suddenly, she knew that there were two ships attacking them, not one, and Renard was still far below, struggling up to the fight, but retarded by his extra passenger. Earth and sky were a jumble of peaks and clouds, spinning like a maelstrom. Again, Mike's machine guns yammered. Straight ahead, the first plane strove to scuttle out of range. Above, the other was streaking for home. With a growing yowl, there was a loud, above the French engine, the plane began a swooping, sickening series of dives, painting the skies black with oil smoke. Finally, the pilot got free. He bailed out, a small ball falling through the blue toward the jagged earth below. A banner streamed from him, and then with a jerk, the chute filled. Lois felt sick, but she could not take her eyes from the scene below. Renard dived, and long black lines lanced from the French ship's nose toward the helplessly spinning pilot who swung from silk in the blue. The silk ignited from the tracer, and great gouts of colorless flame flashed as the chute was devoured. The small ball was again tumbling through space, and then it was a dot upon the rough earth. The coolness of sunset came to the small field high in the middle Atlas, where night winds were chill. Staked to the earth, the two planes crouched like fabulous beasts about to spring. The small tents had been erected, and now Renard and Mike were setting a Lewis gun into an emplacement as a precaution against attack.
It was excellent teamwork, huh?
Said Renard, mentioning the air fight for the first time.
Don't include me in that teamwork.
But you...
Yes, I shot him down. He was a slower ship, and I shot him out of the air. But get this, Reynard. I do not kill men in parachutes.
You are squeamish because of that woman, huh? You know and I know that the next time we meet that ship, it would have 10 with it, and we would be dead men. And you know and I know that these fellows have a hard time getting pilots and a hard time getting planes as well. Well, voila. One plane and one pilot less. You know the order they issued many months ago to all of us. Make no reports on pilots killed and planes downed and met, unless they are our own. She is not war, Mike. She is not revolt. She is nice, legal murder.
Shut up. Here comes Miss Dugan.
Renard looked at Mike and then unwillingly walked away. Mike busied himself loading the machine gun.
Are there no people in these mountains?
People? Certainly, but some sniper may just have his sights lined on you. Right this very minute.
I can't bring myself to believe that the government would allow us to walk into such danger. And Captain, that unnecessary shooting this
Unnecessary shooting? That's not a very neat way of putting it. He would have spotted our landing place if I hadn't done for him. And as it is, there's a chance that we will not be immediately found. There are several such fields which we would use. We might have gone to any one of them.
But to kill him when he was helpless.
Dear lady, this happens to be Le Maroc. Harems and date palms and camels are all right in the geographies, but they don't go far enough. Harem women are mostly enslaved against their will. Dates are as horrible as a steady diet. And camels, they bite. And it happens that a few dead men more or less are the least of Africans' concern. And as for the government, you are unduly worrying about you.
He shrugged and tested the firing pin before putting a shell under it. The rays of the dying sun flashed on his ring. She looked at it wonderingly. Mike Malloy did not seem like the kind of man who would wear a ring of that description. Uneasily, she sensed importance in that scowling, bright-eyed face of gold.
That is a pretty ring.
This? Oh, yeah, it's, my great-uncle Oscar, he gave it to me in his last dying breath. It's kind of a bad luck charm.
What?
Everybody else, they wear good luck charms. I'm just a little different. I wear bad luck charms.
A rumbling chuckle sounded nearby, and Mike spun around to see Delage. Delage looked at the ring.
Egyptian, was a neat piece of work. Would you like to sell it, Capitan?
Sell it? Oh, I don't think so. It's only but a bauble.
But extremely interesting. There is one like it in the Louvre, but why? Those do not look like real diamonds.
Well, they're probably glass. My great-uncle Oscar wasn't the greatest. False to the end, I suppose.
Ah, well, it's pretty anyway. I suppose we'll start combing the country about here tomorrow. I'm very keen on finding the tomb and returning. That incident this afternoon was not so very pleasant. I had no idea that powder smoke was so acrid. Perhaps there is some small truth to the rumors concerning the restlessness of Morocco these days.
Perhaps. Where there is...
Renard cried from across the field.
here!
They went toward him swiftly. Mike was in the lead, and he caught a glimpse of what Renard had found.
Please, Miss Dugan, keep back.
He walked slowly forward. Renard was standing beside a thing which had once been a man. The arms and legs had been staked out so that the poor devil had had to face the sun. The lids of his eyes had been cut away. Twigs had been thrust through his cheeks. Pointing to some crude knife work, Renard said,
The women, they finished him up.
Something glittered on the dried hand and caught Delage's attention. He knelt down.
Why, it's a ring. Just like yours.
He said to Mike. He looked at Renard.
And you have one too. But why should they leave such a bit of jewelry as this ring?
Get a shovel, Reynard. We'll bury the Lieutenant Farrow as decently as we can.
You know him? Why, how extraordinary. Could it be that he expected you here and came too soon? But why should he be clothed as a native if he is a lieutenant of the French army? Really,
Really? You talk too damn much.
Lois sat in her tent, trying not to hear. But the scrape of shovels across the field were like fingernails on a blackboard to her. And then it was quiet, and she heard a voice, Mike's voice, drift softly across the open.
Goodbye, Farrow.
The wind moaned through the passes. Between the peaks and all about them stood the Atlas, great black masses drawn close in darkness, weighing down upon the small camp. When morning came, he would lose no time in finishing this business and getting out. Quite evidently, the bringing of a party into the Atlas had not provided the mask for which General Leroy had hoped. The attack that afternoon had proved one thing very definitely. Something was about to happen here in the Atlas. Something which France and Sidi Mohammed, the Sultan, must not know. Without doubt, there was a leak in Fez. He would keep up some pretense to the girl and Delage, and would soar out to ostensibly search for the tomb. If possible, he would uncover whatever was happening, and then streak back to Fez. Suddenly, he was confronted with the other half of the problem. Lois Dugan was beginning to mean a great deal to him. During the day's excitement, she had not shown the white feather once. But now, a lovely and infinitely desirable woman did not think he measured up very well, and here she was, staking everything on a silly book which probably didn't exist. But maybe it did. 1,000-year-old parchment volume about anything would be worth hundreds of thousands, and this one, it would be worth a fortune. If he ran away the instant he uncovered Al-Alpha-size operations in the Atlas, he would be ruining the girl's chances. High command never meant much to Mike Malloy. Of course, he would carry through with his bargain, and he would get the information if he lived to do it, but at the same time, he had to make certain that he wasn't wrecking Lois Dugan's life. It was a sorry mental mix-up for Mike Malloy, and he thought so hard about it that when Renard came to relieve him...
Quiet?
Too damn quiet. Now I've got the feeling that they know that we're here.
So have I.
First thing in the morning, I'm going to take a flight. I'll look over things from the air, and if I see anything, I'll radio you. If I fail to get free, you can take off for Fez in a hurry.
Right.
Mike wandered back to his blankets. He sat down and started to unlace his artillery boots, but he did not finish. He sat silently for several minutes, and uneasy premonition stealing over him. He tied his boots and unloosened the flap of his holster. Something was warning him not to stay in this bunk. He moved silently up to the edge of the field and sat down beside a broken stone wall, well knowing that it was better to lose sleep than to go to sleep forever. The dreary hours slowly passed. Abruptly, the machine gun clattered madly. Even before Mike was on his feet, it had stopped. He leaped toward the post.
It's Mike! Reynard, where are they?
It was too dark to see what hit him. The body caromed off of his broad chest and started away. Mike made a grab and caught a swirling robe. He jumped for his quarry and aimed a blow on the guest. It connected, and his victim grunted, dropping away. Mike was on top of him, trying to hold him down, the jalaba making it difficult to get a good grip on the man. But the robe was suddenly empty in his hands. He heard footsteps racing away. An automatic pistol spat near the plains, and then there came a shrill, frightened yelp, followed by the yowl of pain. Swift blows smacked, and then the field was again still. Running toward the ships, Mike shouted, "It's Malloy! Don't shoot!" A pocket light clicked on and played its cold beam along the side of the plane. Because of the light was not directed at him, Mike could see who held it. It was Lois Degan. He was instantly at her side, striking the flashlight down. He caught it and turned it off and threw her with himself upon the earth.
You want to get killed?
You tried hard enough.
She panted, spitting out a mouthful of sand. Mike was up again, running toward the plane. He snapped on the light and off and on once to locate the body he had seen. It was Delage, coming groggily to his knees.
I tried to stop him. He was in the plane.
Are you hurt?
Scratched up. I think I nicked him with that shot. There's blood on my shirt.
Mike flicked the light on and off again. He stood listening for some time, but the only sound was the moan of the wind through the ravines. Mike was satisfied that the attacker was gone. He boosted himself into the ship and, cautiously shading the light, found that ruthless hands had ripped the guts out of the radio. He leaped out and sprinted to the other plane. Again, the light showed up on him. He showed that the radio set was beyond repair. He started back to the ship when he missed Renard. The lieutenant had made no sound since that first burst of the machine gun. Mike approached with foreboding. The first cold gray of dawn was seeping into the eastern sky. It would soon be light, but not for Renard. He lay sprawled across the gun, hands frozen to the trips. The attacker had hacked Renard's head half from his shoulders. It had been suddenly done. There was still a stamp of surprise upon the delicately handsome face. Very gently, Mike carried Renard to the wall and laid him down, crossing his hands upon his chest. Delage was there with a shovel. He began to dig. Mike went to the tents for a blanket and started to pull one from his own rumpled bed, but it would not come free. His questing fingers located the cause and recoiled from the iciness of steel. It was of Moorish manufacture, that knife, and it was sharp enough to split hairs. Shaken more than he cared to show, Mike went back to the shallow grave. He rolled Renard into the cover and helped Delage push back the dirt. When it was done, Mike stood against the dawn at the head of the unmarked grave.
Goodbye, Renard.
It was a dismal breakfast. Delage was obviously frightened out of his wits. Delage was very quiet. His eyes were gray and muddy. And he would stop whatever he was doing to sit tensely, listening, as though his ears were keener than most and could hear things miles and miles away. Lois Degan's hand shook a little as she poured Mike's coffee. He looked up from his seat on the machine gun tripod and smiled at her. He knew her kind now. She could keep her calm up through anything and could carry on as long as necessary.
Good girl.
Why? It was my idea that got us into this. And I would be a pretty poor sort if I leaned on you now.
Strange words they were to come from such a fragile and beautiful face. To Delage, she said,
Stand by your gun.
The shadowless man gave a start. He glanced up at the heights.
No, I would not know what to do. I can't shoot a machine gun.
You mean you know that the man at the gun is the first target in attack? But can you at least fire one, Delage?
My dear Capitan, my mechanical ability is limited to a fountain pen.
You guys are a lot of help. I've got to shift the gas cargo into my plane and destroy Reynard's. That is, unless you can fly?
Delage shook his head vigorously. Mike turned to the machine gun.
Well, in case somebody knocks me off, this won't be turned on to French troops anyway.
He pulled out the loading handle and stuck it in his belt. Mike succeeded in placing the plane at the far side of the field. For a few minutes, he worked on the engine and then stepped back, smiling sardonically.
God help the Berber that fools with that now.
Why?
Because I shorted the ignition through the gas lines, and the 5 gallons of gas I've left in the tank will blow him to glory the second he touched the switch.
He began to empty the salvaged gas into the tank of his own ship. Lois watched him for several minutes with a shudder.
And now, who's going with me? It doesn't much matter, because none of you know machine guns.
You mean you're going to scout for the tomb?
Well, yeah, if you want to put it that way.
Tell me, aren't you supposed to make some manner of radio report to Fez?
Yes.
Well, then, when they fail to get it this morning, they may suspect that something has happened and sent out a squadron to locate us. If that is the case, someone should make very certain that we can be seen from the air.
Mike looked at him for several seconds.
Monsieur Delage, it should by this time be very apparent that not all is well.
Yes, but...
In the first place, the lack of a report will occasion no comment in Fez. They expect it if we are alive. If they don't get it, then, well, so far as the staff knows, we're dead. No squadron is going to come for us, Delage. You may as well know it now.
But I failed
No squadron will come, because the act of dispatching a fighting fleet into the Atlas would be likely to blow off the lid. Well, you should have known that. You should have known that Morocco was just a fuse waiting to be lit. The explosives have all set. The question is, where and how will it go off? We got 2 planes. Under the flimsy guise of an expedition, only those 2 planes can enter these mountains. To escape is something else. Unfortunately for you, Monsieur Delage, you have come on a suicide mission, and I'm none too hopeful about getting back. You are the pawn...
I'll protest to the Ministry of War. They cannot do this thing to me. I am a man of influence. One word from me...
And the French army does as it pleases.
I do not believe it.
Your belief is not necessary to the truth. Now consider, whoever stays here can remake the camp on that cliff face so as to command the field with the rifle in case of an attack. The one who goes with me goes into probable aerial combat. La Versailles seems to have planes in this atlas, so God knows where they came from.
Delage looked at the face of the cliff and began to pick up baggage for the shifting of the camp. Mike looked at Lois.
Well, he has unanimously elected you, like the gallant Frenchman that he is. If I did not need an observer, you could stay here. But I happen to need one. And further, there is a chance that you can locate your Laoud. That is, if you have any idea.
Oh, I have. The place was charted within a mile. My uncle worked it out with a Moore chart from the Atlas, which he discovered in an old book. It was buried with Ibn Tumart.
Well, let's go then. Looking for one thing, I expect to find another.
You will be back for me?
Though it will probably be difficult, yes. The French army may not care about you, but you would be a heavy conscience.
I didn't know you had one.
Without comment, he helped her into the ship and then slid into his own seat, sliding the hood into place. He started the engine, taxiing into the wind. He saw that Delage was watching him forlornly. He waved to him, but he was too despondent to wave back. The peaks slipped below them, and Mike glanced back to see if Lois was taking it well. It startled him a little to find that she was examining a small chart which she had taken from her pocket.
What a woman.
To the south, in a hidden reach of the Atlas, lay a field which had been painstakingly cleared and leveled to make a runway 1/4 of a kilometer long. Along this narrow stretch of many great sheets of canvas had been stretched on poles and painted to simulate Earth. A score of planes were so massed, and with widespread wings they seemed to crouch in the shelters waiting for the cry of war. Within 2 hours, these great fast ships could lay the French fields and barracks of Fez in ruins. Mechanics worked on motors. The sleeves of their jalabas rolled back and their skirts greasy. Pilots not yet needed lounged in canvas shade, smoking innumerable cigarettes and bragging what would be done when the command was given. Deserters from a dozen armies were there, gold jingling in their pockets, and hopes of high position making them gloat over the future's prospects. A plane motor struck silence across the field and taxied to a dusty landing. The man in the gunner's pit stood up, and a sweeping shout blasted across the field. Alal Fasai. Pilots, gunners, and mechanics crowded about. Alal Fasai was a fit fellow to lead such a crew. His jalaba was black, and a dagger balanced the automatic at his belt. The face was withdrawn into the hood.
I salute you, my brave ones.
He said as he raised his hand, palm outward.
I come to tell you that all is in readiness. 3 days, and the foreign dogs shall not look into the air and meet death. And when they try to run, they will find in every beggar and shopkeeper an armed and fighting soldier. The Sultan will bar himself in his palace to discover death at the hands of his own guard. Even now, the armors are being distributed. The world is being passed. In 3 days, no infidel Christian in Morocco shall be alive.
They cheered him until the best of them were hoarse. The echoes rolled like cannon fire through the gorge. Allah permitted them to lift him down. A Berber chief named Zaig had once been an athletic pride of Oxford, stepped forward. He was in command of the airbase.
Master, there has been news received from Fez. In these mountains, this very minute, army espionage is at work. Under the blind of a quest for a book, Laoud.
You think I would remain ignorant of this for long? Every shrub in Morocco has ears listening for Al-Fazai. I paused with Ruala, and I have even further news. Last night, commendable enterprise saw to it that Lieutenant Renaud was killed. The Ruala say that he unhappily fired a warning before he died, thus making it impossible for the others to be killed. Since there was no way of knowing whether or not another machine gun covered the camp, a certain infamous captain named Malloy and 2 dupes of some political importance are still alive. It is probable that Malloy will scout for this field. Perhaps he knows what is here. Perhaps he does not. But if France knew, then no such pair of officers would have been dispatched. Their radios are wrecked, and they cannot communicate with Fez.
3 of you, take to the air and try to find this Captain Malloy. Some others will go in the field and trap him should he fail to be found in the air. We have done for the other agents throughout the Atlas. He is the last, and we must take no chances on his escaping.
Zaig turned and told off the 3 pilots, who immediately moved toward a squadron of ready pursuit planes. It was all a minor detail to Al-Fazai. He walked excitedly beside Zaig.
To think that all Morocco will be in our hands within 3 days.
Yes, it has been long in coming, but Allah is good.
Mike was there to look over the ground and discover, if he could, any possible troop concentrations. Consequently, it was of little moment exactly where he went, and he followed the girl's directions, all the while watching his own. He had been looking anxiously for half an hour, trying to discover a peak which was split like a gun sight. And now she found it. Excitedly, she shook Mike's shoulder.
There it is!
He located it, still greatly preoccupied with his ground search.
What is its compass bearing?
306 degrees.
It should be approached at 350. And then 27 kilometers away from its base, we will find 2 intersecting ravines, about which there is a small plateau. You'll try, won't you?
He caught some of her excitement. It would do no great harm to at least locate the site, and so, continuing his ground search, he corrected the approach. And he was puzzled at the emptiness of the villages, the lack of rifle fire from the ground. For all he could see, the last Berber in the Atlas had vanished. He was still preoccupied with this problem when she again smote his shoulder.
There's the ravines!
He looked down and saw them, somewhat amazed at the accuracy of her information.
How do you know this will lead to Laoud?
A man spent 30 years tracing this. I would be witless indeed if I couldn't follow directions.
You ought to have been a surveyor.
Do you think I left on such a search without studying something?
If you'd studied gunnery, it would have been more to the point.
There's the plateau! Now, down that other hill there should be the ruins of an old settlement. Ibn Tumart's domain was on that hill to the right, and his tomb was on the bank of a creek. There's the creek!
He put one wing down and slowly turned on it, looking at the tumbled walls of the ancient buildings.
Can we land?
He looked at her, and then at the earth, which appeared to be turning below them. It was strewn with boulders, large and small, but if wind permitted and piloting skill could be fully employed, there was a chance.
Okay, we're going down. But don't feel bad if we never take off again.
Here the wind was treacherous with cross currents caused by the roughness of the terrain, and gust after gust tossed the two-seater about. The wheels touched, and the plane was jarred by a series of impacts. Finally, they were safe in the quiet of the Atlas sunlight. Mike mopped his brow and looked at Lois. He realized that she had not appreciated the danger of that landing, or else she was too overcome with reaching the end of her search. She was out of the plane in a moment, running toward the ramp which led down the ravine from the plateau. She stopped and looked back.
Aren't you coming?
He got out and scanned the sky. The uneasy knowledge that the French plane had probably been spotted made him hesitate. But Lois was already halfway down the broken ramp which had once been trod by the feet of Roman legions. He followed. At last, she pointed ahead.
There. I told you it was here. Look, Mike.
He saw a conical structure like a beehive grown to bungalow dimensions. The thing was carved by centuries of wind, and it looked very worthless and forlorn.
That's it.
Mike came up and sat down on a stone slab. Lois walked all around it, trying to find an entrance and discovering none. At last, she returned helplessly to Mike.
Isn't there some way we can get in?
Calmly, he reached into his shirt and brought out a bundle of dynamite, to which a cap had already been attached. She missed this fine disregard for safe practice.
I was saving it for Berbers, but it's all in good cause.
So he drilled a hole the height of his head and inserted the dynamite. He lighted the fuse and raced back. The explosion was loud, and the soft, eroded stone crumpled under the downward burst. Mike took a pocket light and stepped in. Ibn Tumart was there, beyond doubt. At least all that mortal remains of the man. A few grains of dust in a metal box. Berbers had a superstition about tombs, but Lois was not hampered. She began by sounding the box and, finding nothing, examined the pedestal on which it stood. A fine cloud of dust rose. Mike, meanwhile, inspected the walls, and it was Mike that found Laoud. Not being able to appreciate the 30 years of preparation and research which had gone into its discovery, and having only to reach into a niche and bring forth a silver box, well preserved in this dry climate, he did not consider that the book could be worth much. He looked at it lying in its small coffin and was struck by curiosity about the gold formula. Lois, with a glad cry, came to his side. Hastily, she took the book from it.
Don't touch it. It's liable to fall apart.
She used a small knife to lift the pages and soon confirmed the volume's identity.
Here it is. Antimony, boiled with zinc, in the black of the moon, to which must be added a pinch of hair from a 2-year and 7-month-old gazelle.
That won't work. It takes electronic bombardment.
Of course it won't, but that doesn't detract from the fact that this is an archaeological treasure. My men have been looking for this book for centuries.
Well, there it is. Now how about getting upstairs before somebody spots our ship and gets ready for a reception?
Clutching the silver box, Lois sat back in her seat. She was too elated and overcome with success to pay much attention to anything else. Mike started the engine and examined the poor excuse for a runway ahead. He held his breath as he fought his way through the stones. At last, he was clear and building altitude. He grew conscious of the moisture on his brow and hands. With a look of relief, he turned to Lois. But she had scarcely seen what had happened. At first, it made him somewhat angry to have his 2 skillful flying victories so lightly regarded.
You might at least say, gosh, like, it isn't human to be not scared stiff when you go through something like that.
She looked at him in wonder, realizing that he was actually a little put out at her.
But you're at the controls, and I know you'll see us through no matter what.
I'm a louse, but you trust me.
Why shouldn't I? I'm sure that your character has nothing to do with your fighting skills.
It brought him down a moment, but he had no time to ruminate on her swift check. High above them, 3 planes were flying in tight formation. They were pursuit ships, and their absence of insignia was insignia enough.
I hope you're right. We've got some callers.
The sight of those 3 hovering planes drove all triumph out of her. Her hands clutched at Lude's silver case, and she winced under the threat of losing that for which she had sought so long. Anxiously, she looked at it. Mike's wide shoulders in the glass, and in the hood glass she could see a strong profile and the glint of determination which had come into his eyes. The 2-seater was boring sky, and the earth was all crazy and aslant below, and the 3 ships above were waiting with calm circles as though they were more than certain of their prey. Mike drilled straight at them, as though extremely anxious to meet them, and they saw and confidently let him come. For seconds, the pursuit ships did not realize what he was doing, and when they did, they had lost most of their advantage. They swooped as one into a dive, which would bring them close to the French ship's tail. Mike let his throttle full out, and the ship shivered under the drive of speed.
Are you trying to get back to the field?
If we can lose these guys, we'll get Delage. If we can't lose them, and are still going ahead, we're going to Fez. I think I know what's happening in the Atlas. Those ships are the best made in any fascist country.
At long range, the others opened fire. Occasionally, their tracer came close enough for the smoke to be shredded by the French plane's slipstream. It soon became apparent that Mike did not have any edge of speed. Slowly, the trio was coming closer and more frequently chattered their guns. Mike dived to pick up more speed. Full out and heading straight, they were fast approaching the landing field where they had left Delage. But the pursuit planes also dived.
Hold on!
Suddenly, he yanked back on the stick. The loop was so swift that the centrifugal force almost crushed Lois. The world went black as the blood left her head. Mike picked the switch, shut, and pushed his stick into the panel. The 2-seater started straight down, and all the Atlas leaped skyward toward them, jagged and yellow. Lois felt as though her head was about to split in 2 pieces. Nothing could stand such a dive, entered at 300 miles an hour, and now risen to 500 miles an hour. Mike didn't intend anything to stand it.
You'll have to jump! The ripcord is over your heart. Feel to see if your heart is still beating. Count to 3 and pull!
She started to push at the hood, but the earth was straight ahead, and it was an awful thing.
I can't! Oh God, I can't!
Mike looked at her. At 500 miles an hour straight down, he found an instant to grin.
Hey, you're human after all!
The 2-seater's dive became slowly shallow, and the speed grew less. Mike threw back the hood, and the air roared past like 10 hurricanes. He grabbed Laoud and shoved it under his chute harness. He grabbed Lois's arm, and the pain of his strong hand stung into her action. Suddenly, she was hurtling with him through space. They were slowing down, and the world was still 1,000 feet below. The 2-seater had long gone.
Pull your ripcord when I yell!
She could not stand the falling. She tried to grab at the ring.
Do you want to get killed? Pull!
He released her, and she jerked the ring. She could not see him, and terror gripped her. She felt the shrouds running out, and then with a jolt that seemed hard enough to break her apart, the chute opened. Directly under her was a field, and the wind bore her half down its length in a brace of seconds. She expected bullets and was half puzzled that they did not come. Suddenly, her feet dragged on a downward swing, and despite the fact that she landed tense, she was not hurt. Very strangely, hands had kept her from the ground, crashing into the ground, and men were spilling the wind from her chute in alarm. She stared about her, and gradually the dizziness of the whirling fall left her. The men who were responsible for her easy landing were cloaked into jalabas. Rifles slung across their backs, they grinned familiarly at her. And then she saw Mike very calmly. He spilled his own chute and stood on it while he disengaged his harness. Men were running toward him, carrying rifles in both hands. Among them was a fellow in a black robe, and it was to him that Mike called out in Arabic.
Greetings, Allah Fasai!
Said Mike, carefully pulling the silver box from under his arm.
Yeah, you can thank me for saving you from your own ignorance.
Alal Fasai motioned, and the men eased their firing pins down.
Yeah, it was very funny to have to fight so hard to keep your men from destroying this very rare object.
Alal Fasai approached swiftly.
What have you there, spy?
Spy? A spy in full uniform. Not guilty, Alal. True, I was looking around for you, but with the tricolor flying, this, my venerable creator of riot, will probably interest you. It is nothing less than the one missing book from the Carouine, Laoud. It contains the mystic and magic formula for the makings of gold.
Alal snatched for it like a jackal grabbing fresh meat. The men, enlivened by the magic word gold, came as close as Alal as they dared.
Restore that to the Carouine, and you gave even more prestige. It would show your extreme sympathy with the priests.
Alal Fasai stared at the unconcerned officer.
You give me this, though you know it places all question of success from my uprising? You give me such prestige when you could have thrown it away?
Naturally. You are noted for your knowledge of government affairs, Alal. And that is the one thing which the government does not know about you. Perhaps you recall that a certain officer named Captain Malloy trounced 3 staff officers in a moment of madness, and then he was sentenced to prison and the battalion penal. I am Captain Malloy.
Ah.
And my perseverance at locating Laoud to ensure success to your revolt, it should give you some indication of my loyalty. Now, I've been waiting for this chance, and I regret the necessity of shooting down a plane while we still had radio communication, and this battle just now, which I had to fight to save Laoud. My unquestionable talents as a fighting officer are completely at your command.
Alal looked at him for a long time. He was still not convinced.
Perhaps I can use you when the attack starts. It depends, of course, on behavior. And as I am a man of prudence, I shall keep you under guard. Tonight, I shall radio Fez to check on you. Someone may know something there, you see. In the meantime, you have earned your life.
Oh, by the way, don't touch that French plane over there. It's wired to blow. And, even I would not like to chance that risk. So keep away from it.
Abdeg, put the captain under guard pending further informations.
What happened to the man that was here?
Delage, he was shot.
He was important to France.
No one will know until it is too late.
And the young lady is an American. A man about to set up a new government should be cautious about neutrals.
When I need your advice, Captain, I shall ask for it. Abdeg, place the woman under guard. We are leaving for the airbase.
Lois was close to the breaking point. Her courage had been carried by hope, but now she had seen Laoud carelessly handed to a cutthroat rebel. She made no resistance as they placed her on a horse. She hardly realized that Mike was riding beside her until he spoke.
Don't worry. Things could be worse.
She looked at him bitterly.
I understand most of what you said.
Well, the fortunes of war can, be swung by a man with the ability for lying.
Maybe you weren't lying.
The lady certainly does have a horrible opinion of Mike Malloy.
The sentry who had been posted before the stone hut to guard the prisoners was not at all satisfied with his lot. But as long as Alal Fasai was in camp, he had to look very alert. The hut itself was fairly cool, and for that the philosophic Mike Malloy was very grateful. He was thankful for other things. These men were too intent upon future spoils of war to worry very much about immediate quarry. Had they been bored, the fate of Lois Degan would have been certain. It would have been a certain sealed affair. As it was, they paid scant attention to her, the presence of a woman in camp. Lois was too disheartened to mind the sordid surroundings. By now, she had flung herself face downward upon it. Face buried in her arms, Mike walked up and down the room.
Don't take it so hard. You can never tell what will happen.
You're safe enough. I believe you'd fight for Alal if you had to.
Maybe. It's certain the French never thought much of my inestimable value.
I believe you would lie yourself out of anything.
It's an art. Look, dear lady, don't take this all so hard. If Alal finds out I'm all right for his purposes, all we have to do is pretend that you belong to me, and there won't be any argument.
Belong to you? A self-confessed murderer and embezzler and deserter and a...
And don't try to think up more, okay? That's plenty. I told you, none of it was my fault. My luck just runs this way. The man I shot in Cochin, China was going to shoot me in a duel, wasn't he? And I tried to... what the hell's the use? Everything I've ever done has turned out backwards. And I wanted you to like me, and I've even made a mess of that. Yes, that's right. I wanted you to think I was a swell guy. So I didn't lose any time trying to show you that everything that was said about me wasn't entirely true. Law has a habit of looking at the cold facts and not what lies behind them. As a matter of fact, the only thing which was ever hung on me was busting 3 staff officers because...
He had stopped and went to the window.
Why did you fight them?
Oh, you wouldn't be interested.
I might be.
Well, you see, a sergeant was flogging a Spahi, and I took the whip away from him. I took it away from the sergeant to show him how it felt, these staff officers. And they saw it, and they told me that I wasn't a Spahi, and that I had no authority over the punishment, and that, in the second place, I was interfering with discipline. I wouldn't give the whip up, so they tried to take it from me. And the aide, well, I picked him up and threw him at the colonel. And the lieutenant colonel, and...
So that's how you landed in jail?
Sure. I mean, you don't do things like that on African service. Everybody's always jumpy, especially at a time like this, with our friend Alal trying to blow the place apart.
What will you do if he accepts your service?
Well, I don't know. He'll find out 2 things from his Fez agents. He'll discover why I went to jail, and then he'll also find out that, no matter what else I've done, I've never sold anybody out. If he finds out the latter...
He drew his forefinger across his throat, and Lois shuddered.
That's the price of having a reputation for loyalty. But maybe he won't find out. There's one thing certain. If I don't get information to the Fez about this lovely layout here, Le Maroc as a French possession, it's finished.
Do you think Alal will succeed?
Well, how can he help it? He's got these dopey natives believing the French are responsible for drought and windstorms and the size of the sun. They think they'll be happy under Alal. Alal is just a puppet for the dictators. The woes of Morocco have just begun. They can't see it, though. France has been just too easy on them. And because she's been easy, about 50,000 troops will be eased into Shaitan's tender mercies. And not 10 white men will be alive in the whole country. God. If we'd only know that he was bringing these bombers in from the south. But it seems so impossible that he would be able to get them. And I can't understand it. Alal Fasai is just a 2-bit marionette. So far as anybody knows, but then nobody knows.
Mike sat down on the table. It was very wobbly in its legs. With sudden interest, he inspected it. Soon he lost interest, and having talked himself out, stared thoughtfully at the wall. Lois watched him. Slowly, time wore away, and the long shadows began to merge with the dusk. They saw a tall Berber approach. Zaig paused with one boot on the step and looked through the ironwork at Mike.
We have received word from Fez, and we regret exceedingly, old chap, that our agent there thinks you're a most interesting liar. He heard, you see, your conversation with General Leroy. It is then my unpleasant duty to take you out and shoot you. All you fellows are the same.
There's no such word as mercy in your vocabulary, is there?
Mercy! Where a French officer is concerned? Oh, you amuse me. Unlock the door, sentry.
Keys rattled, and then Mike did an unexpected thing. He turned to Lois and pulled her toward him.
Please,
He said to Zaig as the Berber stepped in.
tell me what is to become of this woman.
Perhaps I have use for her. I early learned to appreciate white women.
Fiercely, Mike held Lois close to him. He startled her by almost kissing her, but then he turned angrily to Zaig.
You might have enough courtesy to look away.
Zaig grinned and turned around. The table leg came down, and the leg crushed Zaig's skull. Almost in the same instant, Mike swung the club a second time, straight into the sentry's face. He caught the rifle before it fell, and swiftly snaked the body inside.
There's one white woman you'll never appreciate.
He dropped the dead body of the Berber into the corner and started toward the door and stopped. On the field, a Alpha-sized plane had been wheeled into line, bound for another concentration point. Alal was climbing into his cockpit. His pilot received his signal and took off. The plane flashed by, Allah was just pulling on his helmet. Mike drew back.
You'll find us out in a moment. We haven't a chance to steal a plane. Somehow, we'll have to run for it. Are you game?
She clutched his hand and followed him through the door. They swiftly went through the gathering darkness, their way masked by the hut. Until they had climbed a considerable distance up the side of a hill. After that, it was easier going and more difficult to be seen. Before they were out of sight of the camp, Mike looked back.
Some soldiers. Empty gas drums lined up in the first hangar.
Let's go.
They turned and they sped through the gloom. Lois had lost all sense of direction and forgotten that one can steer by the stars. Accordingly, she was astounded 2 hours later to find that they were scrambling down a steep slope into the field on which they had landed first.
Praise Allah. They took my word about the plane.
He went swiftly to work upon it and with little trouble reconnected the gas lines and ignition in their proper places. As he helped her into the pit, he looked into her face for a moment. She caught her breath, but he only eased her into the seat. He started the engine. The roar, which seemed to blast the very stars, made Lois fear they would certainly be heard and apprehended before they got away. Building altitude in steady spirals, Mike brought the moon into sight. Lois began to wonder if Mike had really lost his way this time. He kept on going up, up, without ever heading north toward the safety of Fez. But she did not question him. She merely wondered about it and felt safe and weary. She knew she must have slept because she had no knowledge of when the engine had stopped. For an instant she thought it was Fez, and then she knew there had not been time enough. In a steady, silent glide, the two-seater was going down the sky, and then she saw their objective. What had appeared to be a long strip of cultivated field became suddenly the air base of Alal, and they still made no sound.
Hold on tight. This is gonna blow us all over the sky.
And then Mike started the engine. It burst forth with its strident song. The plane quickened pace, and the earth shot toward them. Mike pressed his machine gun trips. The burst was deep into the hangar, probing for the empty gasoline drums, as explosive as bombs under the fire of tracer bullets. With a flash of flame, a drum exploded. The first drum took a second, and then a dozen went together. Straight up went the two-seater. The first wave of the concussion hit it and sent it like a leaf in a hurricane. Mike fought the ship level before it could spin. He was shaking a little, and he looked back at Lois. She was white of face, but she nodded, and that she was all right. He started to streak toward Fez, but a shadow flicked across the two-seater. Mike turned and looked up to behold, silhouetted against the moon, the fast two-seater that had carried Alal Fasai away that afternoon. Alal Fasai, returning, had seen the havoc, and now he saw the cause and was seeing madness. Without a gunner of his own, there was only one thing which Mike could do. He stabbed straight up at the oncoming plane. With the other man, who broke, he yanked wildly back on his stick. A fraction of a second later, so did Mike. Wheels to wheels, the two planes hurtled toward the stars. But Mike was below the other. Alal could not use his guns in that position, but Mike could. Throwing his lances of lead just ahead of the other ship, Mike succeeded in accomplishing his purpose. The other whip-stalled and headed for the earth. At the first touch of the landing gear, Alal's pilot struck a hole, gouged out by the bomb fragments, and the ship somersaulted and crashed upon its back. Sailing smoothly, and Mike put his ship down. He looked watchfully around the field, but there was no menace here now. He examined Alal's plane from afar, but the man who would never be the dictator of Lamrock was hanging by his knees from his belt. Without a thought of fight, Mike secured his gun and cut him down. Alal sprawled on the smoking earth, looking dazedly at the chaos which reigned. Mike cut the pilot out of his cockpit and boosted him over to Alal.
You're an important man in France. We can't afford to lose you now. The War Department would be extremely upset to have anything happen to you.
Alal Fasai scowled darkly.
And if we wash some of that stain off your face along with the pencil lines, I'm pretty sure that we'd find Monsieur Delage. Who thought machine guns were horrible? Come, gentlemen. The firing squads of France awaits you.
How did you know?
Mike plucked a laoud from under the jalaba. It was uninjured.
You wanted to gain face with the people by giving this to the Carawine. That sealed your prestige. You didn't become interested or answer Miss Dugain until your revolt looked certain. And again, Delage, only you could have tried to murder me and then slaughtered Reynard. Berbers, I might remind you, do not like to fight in the dark. And they would never have the courage to enter such a camp alone. They would have come by the hundreds. And your knife, Monsieur Delage, bore the legend, made in Amberg.
The dress parade was colorful, and the Legion band was in very fine form. General Leroy came down the parade ground to where the air service stood. He stopped.
Capitaine Michel Saint-Marie-Jacques Malloy du Vincent,
Mike stepped a stiff pace forward, looking very grave.
for conspicuous gallantry beyond the limits of duty.
He pinned the medal on Mike's chest and then brushed Mike's cheeks with his whiskery face. And the parade was over. The Legion went playing quick time, and the troops broke formation, and various officers, among them a colonel and lieutenant colonel and his aide, shook Mike by the hand and told him they always knew he was a fine fellow. Mike searched through the crowd for a certain person and heard General Leroy say,
No, I have never made an error. It is my excellent judgment of men which has made this campaign successful.
The press was taking it all down raptly. Suddenly, a long staff car drew up, and a captain yelled up at Mike.
I got your baggage! You missed the train!
Mike, looking anxiously around, approached the car.
Gosh, I thought she'd stay for some of that.
This was love.
Finance.
Suddenly, Lois was before him, brightly smiling eyes, very proud of him.
Look, so the French government is going to give you 500,000 francs as your share of Laoud. They're presenting it to the Carouine, and they'll get plenty of face by doing it. Is that all right with you?
Yes. You're going away, Mike?
Me? Yeah, I'm sure. Well, the family found out what a fine fellow I was in the newspaper. Here.
He fished out a radio message from his jacket.
Certain you would enjoy Paris. Have appointment as air advisor waiting. We await you with gladness. All my love, General Malloy du Vincent. But I thought maybe you might celebrate your medal.
The French captain kicked Mike sharply in the boot. It was disastrous. Mike almost fell out of the car. Lois saved him.
Are you going to Paris?
Yes, I'm going to Paris.
Well, what the hell are we waiting for? Get in.